Today I'm going to share a few tips on how to homeschool with a baby, and I'm going to be sharing my worst homeschool mistake to date. We're going to start with my worst mistake today because it's relevant to the tips that I'm about to give. It's actually relevant to probably almost every homeschool tip out there that you would come across. Have you ever heard or tried a homeschool tip or method or curriculum and either had it flop in a colossal manner or succeed supremely? I definitely have experienced both. So there can be so many variables among homeschooling families, and to make things more complicated, what works in one season might not work in the next. What works this month might not work for the next. One of the biggest mistakes I have made in my homeschool journey is wanting so hard to believe in more absolutes that exist when it comes to homeschooling and wasting time looking for that perfect pot of gold homeschooling formula at the end of the rainbow. Oh, and in basically believing that there's just one best way to get the job done. One of the hardest lessons that I've had to learn in my journey is to be flexible and not judge a method or a way of teaching or a curriculum or a way of doing something too quickly. There are certain things I've done and tried that worked in one season and flopped in another, but there's also things that I tried that flopped in one season and thrived in another. So it's really hard but important to remember to be flexible. In homeschool and in life in general, some of us crave and want absolutes. Sometimes we're fortunate enough to find an absolute that either works 100% for our family or doesn't. But oftentimes we make the mistake of finding something that works and we don't realize it's not going to work permanently. Or else we find something that doesn't work and we don't realize that there is going to come a time where it won't only work for us, but it might be critical to a successful homeschool day or year. Before I share the tips on how to homeschool with a baby, it will really help if I expound on this very important topic just a little bit more and give you some examples. So there are 4 basic seasons. There are major seasons in education: preschool, elementary, middle school, and high school. And a lot of times I see a mother homeschooling in the elementary grades and she'll swear off something and say it's going to be forever. And she doesn't realize that that very thing that failed in elementary school is going to be needed in high school. So then a few years down the road, high school hits and you'll see questions in homeschool groups and forums where the mother is dealing with a situation and she doesn't realize the solution to her problem is a method or something she swore off in elementary school because it didn't work then. So as I share and as you hear these tips, I think there's 18, or any homeschool tips really, when you're listening to any of them, keep in mind where your child is at in the homeschool journey because that really matters. So now that we've covered all of that, let's dive into how to homeschool with a baby. Keeping in mind the level that your school-age children are at. Before we do jump in though, I do want to validate you moms out there. If you're doing this, I'm not going to lie to you, homeschooling with a newborn, a baby, and a toddler, it's one of the hardest jobs I've ever had in my life. And I've had a few jobs in the past. I have worked construction, I've worked house cleaning jobs, I've worked with the public as a carry-out person, a cashier in a grocery store, which isn't very fun or easy because people can be really rude. I've also worked at a health clinic, at a health food store, and I've worked with sick and dying before, but I'm here to tell you, of all the jobs I've ever had, homeschooling with a small child or an infant in the mix is definitely the hardest. If you're homeschooling with multiple children, a baby, and you also have children with special needs like ADHD, it makes it even more challenging. I have had quite a few views lately on my ADHD videos, and I was just asked multiple times how to homeschool with a baby and the ADHD children. So years ago, I had a video on this topic. I was actually homeschooling with my baby. The video was so poor quality and it had relatively unseen views. I mean, it was actually hurting my channel. So I took it down. I've been meaning to replace it with a better quality video ever since then. I don't have a small infant around anymore to actually show you how I did this and do this, but I have been at this for over 14 years now. My oldest is getting ready to graduate and I've got kids in every phase on down. So this is just going to be me standing here telling you the way I got through and the tips that I learned along the way. But I just want to say again, if you're thinking this is crazy hard, yep, you're right, it is. Hopefully these tips can help you though. Do remember that what works for one family might not work for another as I'm sharing these because your lifestyle matters, so definitely use discernment. Tip 1. The first tip is to prepare your mind. Plan on there being a lot of breaks, Be prepared to be flexible. Self-care, it's going to be essential to help get you through this. Tip 2, tagging on the last tip. I'm not going to tell you to get up early and be intentional with your mornings, because I know that if you have a newborn or a child under the age of 2, you're probably sleep deprived. And I know that there are days that you wake up to a crying child that needs your immediate attention. I know that that's how the day begins for a lot of you that are homeschooling with small children in the mix. I will tell you though, that if you can even find a brief 5 to 10 minutes sometime between you wake up and before school starts to do something restful and recharging, if you can mentally prepare your mind for the homeschool day before it hits, this really helps. In addition to that, you got to take some breaks through the day just to breathe. Pour yourself a cup of coffee or tea, or just 5 minutes to zone out and recharge your mental batteries. Tip 3, guard your homeschool hours. When you are homeschooling with small babies, you're going to have interruptions, and the last thing you need are outside interruptions. So get a sign for your door that says homeschooling in session, and get an autoresponder on your phone that takes calls during those homeschooling hours. I have a lot of people tell me, and I've experienced it pretty severely firsthand, where people might challenge you on this. I could tell you story after story actually. A lot of people assume that since a homeschool mom is home all day, that she has free time. She's home all day, so, I've had more than one person suggest to me personally that their schedule's more important than mine because I can adjust mine. I've had to stand pretty vigilant guarding our homeschool hours. On this note though, try not to make personal calls during school hours either, because if you're making personal phone calls and accepting them during school hours, friends and family, they're going to see a double standard. I even go so far though as to try not to make appointments during school hours, because I don't know what it's like in your home, but if we spent a morning on the town getting appointments done, there's no redeeming the homeschool day. So maybe your homeschool's different. Our best focus hours are before 2, so guarding those hours before 2 are a really big deal for us. And they will be for you as well if you have small children. Tip 4, curriculum matters. A lot of us start out homeschooling using whatever curriculum a friend or an influencer recommended, and that looks nice to us. But did you know that every curriculum caters to a specific lifestyle and pedagogue? I think I'm saying that correctly. Pedagogue. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly or not, so forgive me if I'm saying it wrong. Anyways, I think you get the point. If you have not taken a homeschool style quiz though, I highly recommend you Google it and take a few of the tests that are out there. Find out what your homeschool style is, because each style has curriculum that accommodates to that style. This is a huge thing, and it's going to make a major difference in your homeschool, especially if you're homeschooling with a newborn or a small child in the mix. Tip 5, involve the babies as much as you can. One time, I made an entire playroom for our smallest children, but I found that when we started the homeschool day, they wanted nothing to do with the playroom. They wanted to be in on the action. So instead of a playroom, I found it was more helpful to have toddler busy bins and supplies for them so that they could be at the table where the rest of the kids were, since that's where they wanted to be. I always found that after about 1 to 1.5 hours, they wanted to go off and do their own thing, or else they wanted a snack or my attention. Tip 6. Speaking of attention needing babies, when a small child is wanting attention during school hours, it helps to have a bin full of toys that you only take out during school hours. Like right when you're wrapping up a lesson and it's important, and you know you're not going to be able to come back to that lesson and pick up where you left off. We weren't 100% against screen time, so sometimes when I got to that phase, I would let my youngest children watch some kind of an educational little show. But don't forget, your babies are there, they're in on the action, they're part of the homeschool too, and they are learning the whole time as well, whether you're teaching them or not. Tip 7, as your small child enters school age, it helps to have curriculum just for them, even if it's just simple coloring or letter pages. I really love Jen Merkling's Ready for Reading program. It helped keep my younger children entertained for quite some time and educated them. Tip 8, if you have multiple children, you can double up lessons in your homeschool, depending on your kids' ages. It's been proven that we learn 90% of what we teach, and so if you allow your older child to narrate what they're learning to the younger, it will do 2 things. By narrating, they will learn the lesson more deeply that they just studied, but it will also boost their confidence in speaking. At the same time, your younger child will advantage from it as well, and they will have some seeds planted for when they get to that lesson later. There's so much learning that happens in our home without me even prompting it, just because the older kids, they're naturally teaching the younger children, even when I don't know they are. Or else the older child is just doing their thing and the younger child is watching the process. So there's always learning that's happening, and if there's ways you can find to encourage heard that it's great. We call it learning by osmosis. Tip 9, meal planning. I personally like to make a whole bunch of meals for the month, casseroles, a bunch of stuff, shove it in the freezer so that I can pull it out for lunches and dinners, or I'll make extra of something so I can pull it out. Whenever I make a meal, I do a double batch. I don't necessarily plan out a whole bunch of meals, I just make extra. So when I say meal planning, that's what I mean. There's all kinds of breakfasts you can do and just make a whole bunch of them, shove them in your freezer. Always make double when you're making anything so that it saves you having to, make another meal from scratch later. Tip 10, invest in a really good baby carrier. You're gonna wanna get one that is gonna save your back. Some of them can be really hard on your back muscles, like right in here. I have never tried a baby Ktan, but I've heard good things about them from my big family mama friends. Tip 11, if you have preschool age children and a newborn, plus older children, I suggest getting some kind of an online program for your preschooler so you don't have to do quite as much repetition. I used to try to limit the screen time, but I found that I needed some screen time to help out with those littler children with all of that repetition so that I would be free to help the older kids that needed my help. You can also record yourself teaching some of those repetitive things and play those videos of just you reteaching something like flashcards. You can record yourself doing flashcards. You can record yourself doing anything repetitive that your child's littler children are going to need to do a whole lot of times before they have it memorized. Tip 12, make sure you have a good chore chart system in place. We have a tried and true one that I developed and it's actually for sale. But having a good chore system in place can make a really big difference in your homeschool. Tip 13, if you have a multi-grade homeschool, instead of sitting with each one of your children separately for read aloud time, try assigning the children to read aloud time together with the younger children. In our home, this took some training. It took quite a bit of time to teach the younger children to be quiet for the older kids, and it took quite a bit of time because some of the older kids were reluctant to read for the crowd, and that's important to learn to do. It took a long time for me to teach my kids to do this, probably about a year. But the wonderful thing about combining read aloud time and assigning the children to do it with each other is that the older kids get a refresher or review because the younger children's read alouds, and the younger children get to have seeds planted in their mind for what they're coming up to. Now, it's not going to work to combine all the read alouds, probably. Discretion will be needed with this. Tip 14, plan a teacher day a month to organize your space and get a basic checklist or plan for the month. If you're teaching by a script or a box curriculum, look over what's coming up. It helps so much to plan and prepare. You might have to carve out quite time to do it. It took me years to be able to confidently tell my husband, hey, I need you to watch kids because I have to plan. Even teachers have teacher planning days and they don't do all of that with their kids in the class present all the time. I would like to be able to do all my planning with the kids present all of the time, but there's interruptions. So like I said, it took me years to learn to carve out that teacher planning time. Tip 15, find a schedule that works for you. I know schedules have obtained a really bad rap lately, but something I would like to mention is that there are so many different kinds of schedules for homeschooling, and it really depends on where you are in your homeschool journey as to how your kids are going to accept that or work with it. I've had seasons where our schedule was made of what many refer to as a rhythm, so you can look that up, but I've also had seasons where we would just create a list of what needed to be done, and we got to them where we could during the day. This is something I learned through those really hard teething baby years and newborn years. It's something we still utilize today if somebody's sick. I will say that I find it works best to get the math and language arts wrapped up before 12 o'clock noon because after lunch the kids' brains don't seem to work as well for those subjects. We save the other subjects for after lunch though. We've had seasons where our schedule involved getting history and science and geography finished by 3, but we've had other seasons, especially when there's a baby in the mix, where we've had to save history or Bible for Saturday or Sunday when my husband's around and have him help. Alternatively, we've had seasons where Bible and history were done in the evening after dinner. Although we were on a very flexible schedule, it was still a schedule. I would like to say that if all you have are elementary age children and a new baby, then a schedule with set times would be a recipe for failure. However, as your children do start aging, having set time frames can definitely help them a lot and you because this helps them become more independent and prepares them for meeting deadlines in high school or college. And it prepares them for entering the workforce. So I have children in high school, middle, elementary, and then I've got a preschooler too, or a kindergarten now. I found that starting by late elementary and around middle school, it helps a lot to start giving them some time frames to work with. That way you don't have to micromanage older kids all the time. Tip 16, so this is related to what I just said. Help your school-age children learn to become independent. Most kids don't become very independent in homeschool until around 8 or 9 years of age. As soon as children learn to read though, checklists can be made that they can use a pencil to make a check mark on and check off. It can be a lot of fun for them, and it can help you too, so you don't have to micromanage older kids. Tip 17, remember that homeschooling is a lifestyle. It's a way of life. Try not to fit it into a box as something you just got to get done each day. Try to look at it as a way of life. Remember, it's more important that lessons are taught and effectively learned than it is just to get them done at a specific time of day. Don't let the public school standard of filing through lessons your homeschool standard. With homeschooling, you have so much more room and opportunity to focus on quality learning, and remember, Rome wasn't built in a day, and that this home education process takes time. So try to enjoy that process. This will take a lot of the anxiety away that comes with the pressure of filing through lessons by a certain time of day. Once again, it's important for children to learn to finish assignments by specific times, but there needs to be a balance between that and true learning if a passion for learning will ever exist. Tip 18. This one is almost well too known to mention, but I will mention it. Try to get as many subjects as you can done when the baby's sleeping. Last but not least, bonus tip. I do have a bonus tip for you. It's to utilize programs like teaching textbooks if you need to. There are other programs out there like teaching textbooks that cover language arts that you can find. I cannot begin to convey to you the weight it takes off my shoulders knowing I'm not dropping the education ball, that my children are getting an education, while at the same time I'm able to be not just a surviving parent, but a good parent that is present with my children, just by having that plate of not having to teach every single subject. Like math is a big subject too, but not teaching every single subject. You don't have to do it all. You can outsource help, and there is so much help out there to help you as you are homeschooling your gaggle of children or your multiple children. So don't feel like you have to do it all. Utilize programs like teaching textbooks. It will help you make sure your children are getting that good education in the environment of your home, while enabling you to not have to spin every single plate all of the time. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I will have more homeschool related videos in the description box below.